My name's John Bogovic. I am part of the Saalfeld Lab at HHMI's Genelia Research Campus, and this is the Advanced Registration of Big Image Data part of the EMBO BioImage Analysis course in 2023. So first, let me point out that the course materials are at this GitHub page, github.com/BogovicJ, EMBO BioImage 2023 _registration. There will be a link in the description, and here we have an outline of the course, specifically the hands-on sections, and especially of interest is a list of Python notebooks that we'll be going through as for the practical part of the course. Great, so first let's get on the same page. What is image registration? In imaging studies, one often wants to make spatial comparisons between different biological images. That could be the same sample imaged at different times or with a different modality, or different subjects that you want to put into a common coordinate system. And that's what's the case here. Here we have two different individual fruit flies, Drosophila melanogaster, that we would like to spatially compare. And usually the images that come off of directly of the imaging system don't have this property that we want, which is usually the same point in the image has different anatomy, but to do a proper spatial comparison, we want the same point in the image to have the same anatomy. So this is what image registration does, is it finds a transformation of the coordinates of one of the images, called the moving image, so that when you use that transformation or apply it to the moving image, it is aligned with the fixed image, that is, the same point in the image corresponds to the same anatomy. So the first key point that I'd like to emphasize is that the primary output of image registration is the transformation, and that the transformed moving image is just a secondary output. So let's just understand why. If you have the transformation and the original moving image, it is very easy to get the transformed moving image. But if you only have the transformed moving image and the original moving image, it's quite difficult to get the coordinate transformation that came out. So that's why you should think about the transformation as the main output of image registration. So here's an outline for the rest of this lecture. We're going to first talk about transformations in general. Then we'll talk about image geometry, which is an important part of knowing how to apply transformations to images. And then we will look at some practical algorithmic details for image registration, in particular choosing parameters and common pitfalls and big data strategies. These points will be mostly covered in the notebooks that you'll see and that you will work through during the practical part of the course. Great. So first, what is a transformation? So a transformation is a function that takes points or coordinates as inputs and produces other points or coordinates as outputs. So here we have a two-dimensional coordinate system, say x and y, and the transformation is represented by the green arrow, and it transforms this point to this location. But you should think about the transformation actually can be applied to any point in the coordinate system and will produce some output point for every point. Also important is that what is the inverse of a transformation? So that is a transformation that, given the output of some transformation, produces the original input point. So you can think about it as undoing the original transformation. Another way to think about it is that it answers the question, given some point, what do I need to give the green transformation as input in order to get this point as output? Or another way to think about it is, if you think about the transformation as moving points, it answers the question, where did this point come from? At least, where did it start before the transformation was applied to it? And we'll see inverses are an important part of image registration and image geometry. So first, a quiz. Suppose we have this transformation, which is the function of the 2D point xy, and it produces the point x plus y, y minus 12. What is the function of the inverse of that transformation? And pause for a moment if you need to and think about what the answer is. Okay, the answer, of course, is the transformation x minus 5, y plus 12. This is probably easy to understand, but let's just make sure we understand with an example. Suppose we're using the point 0, 0, x equals 0, y equals 0. The transformation will take that point to x plus 5, which is 0 plus 5, which is 5, of course, y minus 12. So 0 minus 12 is, of course, minus 12. So the transformation takes the point 0, 0 to 5 minus 12. And now let's see what the inverse transformation does to the point 5 minus 12. Of course, now 5 minus 5 is 0, and minus 12 plus 12 is 0. So you see that this transformation, the inverse, undoes what the original transformation did. Great, and that will of course be the case for every single point, not just the point 0, 0. Many relationships between images and coordinate systems are transformations. Image registration algorithms usually work between physical coordinate systems and will use an affine or nonlinear transformations. We'll learn about what that means later. But also simpler operations can be thought of as transformations, like the relationship of a crop to an entire image should be thought of as a transformation as well. The relationship between arrays and some physical coordinates can be thought of as a transformation. There's not currently a standard way to write down many types of transformations, even simple ones. I and many people in the OMI and ZAR communities have been working on ways of standardizing this. And if you're interested in participating, please consider joining the conversation at this GitHub page. Okay, so next, it's very important to understand image geometry since we're going to be transforming images. So let's go through some of the jargon and terminology here so that we can understand how to apply transformations to images. So first, the size of an image. This image is 7 by 6, of course, which means that there are 7 pixels in the x dimension, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 6 in the y, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. There is a spacing between these pixels, and here you can see this is the spacing is the distance in physical units between adjacent pixels. So this is 20, a spacing of 20 in x, 20 in x and 30 in y, and those will have physical units like nanometers or micrometers or millimeters, for example. And next there's the origin. So this is the location, again in physical units, nanometers, micrometers, or millimeters, where the pixel with index 0, 0 in the array sits. So here's one question. If this is the origin, which would be 60, 70, what is the physical location of this corner right there? Pause for a moment while you think about it. Okay, so since this pixel is a point and the spacing here in the x direction is 20, that means this distance is 20. That also means that half of this box width is going to be that, which is 10. So this point is this point minus half of the box width, which is going to be 50 in x. And similarly, for the same reason, it's going to be 70 minus half of 30, which will be 55. 55 plus 15 is indeed 70. Good. So another important thing to note is that the pixels here are the dots, not the box. So this is a pixel, this is a pixel, this is a pixel. This box is not the pixel. Rather, this is, in this diagram, it's called the pixel coverage or the pixel-centered region. So when we transform images, we need to transform points, and pixels are point samples. So we will not be transforming boxes, but we will be transforming points. That's very important. So let's emphasize that. Key ideas. Pixels, which are entries in the image array, are point samples, and they're located in physical coordinates, nanometers, micrometers, millimeters, and so on. And we'll reinforce these ideas in this Python notebook. Great. So now we have to cover one of the more counterintuitive aspects of transformations and image registration. So I've been talking about transformations as applying to points because that's what they do. They transform points. But image registration needs to transform images. How do we use a transformation to create transformed images when we can only transform points? So that's what we'll learn now. Let's first define that the forward transformation is what maps points from the moving image to the target image space. So therefore, the inverse transformation will map points from the target to the moving space. What we're going to discover is that we need the inverse transformation to produce a transformed image. So that is, we need the inverse transformation to map images from moving to target space, and we need the forward transformation to map images from target to moving space. And now we'll learn why that is the case. So we have two image grids, the moving image grid and the target image grid. Here, imagine we have pixel intensity values on the left in this grid, and we need to decide how to fill in the values on the pixel grid in the target image so that we have a transformed image. That is, so that we've transformed the moving image grid. Okay, we have a transformation, and you might think, okay, let's just apply that transformation to every pixel location in the moving image and put the value for that pixel wherever it ends up. The problem is that the transformation, the point in the output that the transformation takes this point may not land on a grid position. And therefore, there is no pixel or sample or array element that we can put a value into here. You might try to guess what point to use as an input to the transformation so that it ends up at a grid position. And actually, we already saw how to do that, actually. The inverse transformation tells us exactly how to do that. What we need to do is then give pixel locations in the target image grid to the inverse transformation, and that tells us where to sample from in the moving image grid, and the value that we get we're going to put at this pixel location in the target image space. Of course, this inverse may not land on a grid location in the moving image, but that's not a problem because we can use interpolation, say linear interpolation, to use these adjacent pixel values to give us a value, an intensity value at this point, and whatever we get is what we're going to put here. So the key here is that we can use interpolation to get the value anywhere in between the pixels, i.e. in between the point samples, but we can only put values exactly at pixel locations or samples. So here's just the diagram. And to summarize again, the forward transformation maps points from the moving to the target space, but we need the inverse transformation to map images from moving to target space. So remember this when you're working through this translation initialization notebook. Finally, we're going to go through some details of image registration algorithms, specifically pixel-based image registration algorithms, and we're going to use a nice package called Elastix in the practical section, and that's just one of many very good image registration packages. What we won't be covering in this course are feature-based registration methods, but it's good to know that they exist in case you come across a problem that needs them, and you find that pixel-based methods don't work well. Here is an outline of the image registration pipeline. We know what the fixed and moving images are, and we're going to skip this for a moment, and we're going to first note that the transformation is going to be the main output of the algorithm. So what we need to do then, we're going to take the moving image and transform it using this transformation and using interpolation as we learned. And we're going to compare that transformed moving image to the fixed image. And we're going to compare it using a metric that we choose. So there are quite a few commonly used metrics for image registration. Mean squared error cross-correlation, and mutual information are some of the commonly used methods, commonly used metrics. We're going to learn about how to choose a good metric in the practical part of the course. Okay. What the optimizer does then is it updates the transformation given the metric. So that is, what it does is it tries to find a transformation so that when you compare the transformed moving image and the fixed image, they are as similar as possible according to the metric. We'll see a slide about how that happens in just a moment. Okay, and finally, let's go back to what we skipped here, this pyramid section. The registration algorithm itself may downsample the images to form what is called a multi-resolution pyramid. So first, it takes these images and downsamples them a lot, so you have a very low resolution version of these images, and then it does this loop, and it finds a transformation. Then it uses a slightly less downsampled, let's say a medium resolution version of these images, and updates the transformation, and then finally uses the highest resolution versions of these images and runs the algorithm some more. So this is good both for efficiency and it gives good results. This will be explored a little bit in the practical section of the course. All right, let's first talk about transforms, specifically what are some common types of transformations that are used in image registration. Suppose we have this fixed image A and this moving image B, which has a grid overlaid on it. First, you might use translation as a transformation. So this is only motion in X and Y. So in D, it's showing a rigid transformation, which in addition to translation also includes rotation. And this could be 3D rotation if your images are 3D. Next, we have affine, which is the most complicated linear transformation. So this has translation and rotation and scaling and skew. So this can be quite complicated. Finally, we have what is listed here as B-spline, but is also called deformable or nonlinear registration. And this is the most general type of transformation, but as we'll see, it can do some very crazy nonlinear things like introduce lots of distortion. So while powerful, one has to take care when doing this kind of registration, and we'll learn how to control some of the power in the practical section of this course. Okay, so now let's just look again at what multi-resolution registration means. First, let's look at the bottom row. On the rightmost column, we have the original image. One way to form a pyramid is to just smooth the image more and more. So we see here in resolution 2, it's just a smoothed image of the original. Resolution 1 is smoothed even more, and resolution 0 is smoothed a whole lot. Another approach is to, in addition to smoothing, downsampling the image too. So again, we have the original image. Here we smooth and downsample, and then we smooth and downsample even more, and then finally smooth and downsample a lot. And so the difference between these two rows is that here in the smooth and downsample, the image in A has many fewer pixels than the image in D. And this can be beneficial because it can speed up the registration algorithm because it has fewer pixels to process. But again, we should emphasize that what is important are the physical coordinates of all of these images, and the physical coordinates of all these images are the same. Okay, and finally a slide on optimization. Here we have two axes. These two axes represent the parameters of the transformation, and here we're considering a 2D translation. So our two parameters are the translation in X and the translation in Y. This axis is labeled C is the cost or the metric. So this measures how similar or different the images are from each other. So high values says the images are very different, and low value says the images are the same. So for example here, if we start with this point, which says we have a particular translation and a high value of the cost, a high value of the cost says that the images are different, and indeed they're different because they're not well aligned. But the optimizer tries to find a way to change the parameters of the transformation. That is, how can I change the translation so that the images are more similar? And it does this repeatedly until it finds a good result. So this value is low because it says the metric says the images are similar, and they are, and indeed they're well aligned. So this is the translation that results in a good alignment. Okay. Elastix has potentially complicated parameter files that we will go through in only a small amount of detail during the practical, but we'll only focus on a small number of these parameters during the practical session. But I want to give a broad overview now so that you just see how these parameters relate to the parts of the registration algorithm that we just saw. So starting at the top left, we have just properties of the input images, the fixed and moving images. For example, here we're doing a 3D to 3D registration, 3D moving image, 3D fixed image. Here we have a section that describes how the multi-resolution part of the algorithm works. For example, we have 4 resolution levels there, and there are default values for how to downsample the image pyramids, and usually the defaults are good, but if you'd like, you can manually provide them. There's also options for how to interpolate and resample the image, both during the registration optimization loop and at the end when you're producing an output image, and that's what's described here. Very important is the type of transformation. Here we're going to be doing affine transformation. As well, also very important is what metric you're using. So here in this example, we have mutual information as a metric to compare the images and some parameters of the mutual information. We're going to be doing optimization using gradient descent, and it has a maximum step length, but maybe most importantly, the maximum number of iterations is a common parameter that you might find yourself needing to change when you're tuning parameters for image registration. You can also change the number of iterations per resolution if you want. For example, here we have 4 numbers. This says, so the 4 numbers correspond to the 4 different resolutions here. Let's do that. So we have 4 resolutions there, and that's why we have the 4 numbers. So this would say the lowest resolution do 500 iterations, then do 250 for the next resolution, then 100, then 50, and so on. Finally, there's some options for how to output the resulting transformed moving image. Okay, so that's almost the end of the lecture, but the rest of what we will learn in the practical part of the course, which consists of going through those Python notebooks. And what we're going to do is first reinforce the fundamental concepts, which involve just image geometry and some image transformations. An important thing we'll learn is how to choose an appropriate similarity metric, some properties of registration algorithms, how initialization can be important, and how to keep nonlinear registration under control. We'll also learn some strategies for big data, and the main one we'll learn is that it's possible to run registration at low resolution and apply the transformation at full resolution, again, because the physical coordinates of the image are what matter, not the pixel sizes. Okay, so finally, I'll just go through the notebooks that are going to be in the repository, and this is the recommended order that I suggest you go through them in. So the first notebook is called Resample Images, and in it will just reinforce that images have a physical coordinate system, and that downsampling strategies might affect that physical coordinate system. What you're seeing on the right is a high and low resolution version of the same image in magenta and green respectively, and again, good viewers and good image processing libraries understand that just because they have different pixel sizes, it's not as important as the physical coordinates, so you can overlay these images and it should make sense. These images are in the same physical coordinate system so that you can overlay them even though they're of different pixel sizes. This next one is called translation initialization. So here we have 2 images, one of which is translated by quite a lot relative to the other. These are the same image, just that this one is translated a lot in physical coordinates. We'll learn how to do simple translation image registration using Elastix. And our first tries will probably fail because it turns out that optimizers need some signal with which to work, and we'll see that the initialization is actually very important. And there are common strategies for getting a good initialization, and these are just things that we will learn how to do. Okay, the third notebook is called Similarity Metrics. Unsurprisingly, you'll learn how to choose an image similarity metric. So in particular, we'll see an example in which the mean squared error similarity metric fails. You'll think about why it produced the bad result that it does, and then you'll see how a different similarity metric, mutual information, gives much better results, and then we'll think about why that's the case. Great. Next we have multi-resolution, which is about some strategies for big data. Again, this is focusing on emphasizing that it is possible to run a registration with an image at low resolution and apply it to the same image at higher resolution because transformations go from physical coordinates to physical coordinates. And lastly, nonlinear. This is talking about nonlinear image registration. And the main goal here is we're going to first use some default parameters that give us quite bad results, where what I mean by bad is very high unrealistic deformations in some areas. We will want to understand how we can change the parameters of the image registration so that the resulting transformation that we get is smooth. Also important is how do we measure smoothness. What you're seeing in this image here is an image that shows the Jacobian determinant of the transformation. We will see a little bit in the notebook about what that means, but the important part is that it is a way to quantify how much deformation is introduced by a transformation, and then we'll compare two different transformations that we produce. We will look at this Jacobian image, and we'll understand how we can know that one of the transformations is smoother than the other. And that's everything. I look forward to going through this course with you.